think our next speaker is one of those essential things for events, because at the end of the day, if you don't have money, you don't have anything. We've all experienced that in our personal and professional lives, that at the end of the day, you need the money to keep things flowing. And grant writing is such an amazing resource for our events, especially a new event. And there are a lot of grants available, even our grant, that are sometimes 1 year, 2 year, to get you started. Because until you have your first event, you haven't made that money. So this is kind of that way to get your events kicked off and launched. And grant writing is something that needs to happen far ahead of your event. If you're reaching out and starting 2 weeks out, it's just not going to happen. So this is really some education, food for thought to get you going. So we are very excited to have with us Jacob Chase with Chase Consulting Solutions, because having an expert who knows where to find what grants, what the trends are, what strategy you need to lead into your grant writing. If you have a grant that's due at midnight, you really can't start at 10 o'clock. You really need that prior planning. And we all know that, but I think having an expert kind of tune us into the where and the why and help us strategize and have a plan for your grant writing, not just, oh, I think I'm going to get this grant, or really have a strategy and plan. That's why I'm excited to introduce Jacob to us, and I'll let you tell a little bit about your history and how you got into this role, and get us rolling.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Yeah, thank you for attending. Like Christine mentioned, I'm CEO of Chase Consulting Solutions. We're a grant consulting firm based in Milwaukee. We work primarily with nonprofits, of course, municipalities and healthcare clients throughout the country with grant writing, grant research, prospecting for foundation, state and local government grants, and federal grants. Just a little background about our company. Again, based in Greater Milwaukee, been in business for about 2 years, and really specialize in securing competitive grant funding across a range of industries, agencies, and practice areas. Again, the 3 primary ones being nonprofits and associations, municipalities, and healthcare. While we're based in Greater Milwaukee, we do have a team of 20+ writers and consultants, again, across the country, with more than 250 years of collective experience and more than $1.5 billion in grant funding secured across a range of industries and agencies. So grants and special events. So of course, with any event, there's typically sponsorships are a huge piece that people often think of sponsorships, maybe donations, charitable contributions, maybe allocating a certain portion of a general operating fund to go towards a specific event. A lot of times, though, we don't think about grant makers. So this could be, local foundations, private foundations, anywhere from your small community-based foundation up to, there's a number of larger national foundations, which might be a little outside the scope of an event. State and local agencies. Wisconsin Department of Tourism is a great state agency that focuses on tourism, events, and those sorts of things, especially if it's a larger scale event. That's a great place to look. And then federal agencies, which again might be a little outside the scope, but if it is a larger event, there's a number of federal agencies that do offer like conference grants, USDA, Department of Agriculture being one of them. So some of the benefits of grants, and again, sponsorships are one of those that when you're thinking of event sponsorships always are sort of at the forefront, and sponsorships are great. They're very important and useful for a successful event. But there's a number of ways that grants, are I wouldn't say better, but differ from sponsorship. So one, they can be a little more stable and predictable compared to sponsorships. So sponsors, they might vary a little bit from year to year. Like Christine mentioned, if you have a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year grant funded project, especially if it's a 3 year or maybe even a In the case of federal agencies, it could be a 5-year cooperative agreement. That's more stable and predictable, of course. Sponsors might have specific expectations as far as branding, product placement, marketing, and all of those sorts of things that could maybe hinder some creative freedom. So one thing with grants is often you do want to acknowledge the funder publicly, especially if it's a foundation. They typically expect that. But it's not as, not quite like a sponsorship. So, you know, with a grant, you might do a social media post thanking the funder, maybe a press release. So grants, they allow you to focus more on the quality of the event rather than making sure that you are, you know, keeping up with all the sponsors' expectations. And again, sponsorships, I don't want to, you know, knock on sponsorships at all. They're great and you know, should definitely be part of a funding strategy for your events. But grants are just another way to sort of diversify that. And then finding the best fits. So we'll just kind of go through some different resources, where to look to find some different grant opportunities that might be a good fit or best fits, lowest hanging fruit based on your specific event. So there's a number of, as I'm sure you know, subscription-based grant-seeking resources, Grant Watch, Grant Station, you know, those are some sort of monthly costs. I don't know exactly what they are, but there's a number of free resources as well. So the Grantsmanship Center and Instrumental are two of our favorites that we always use. And again, keep a pulse on state government agency websites. So Wisconsin Department of Tourism is a great one, specifically related to travel and tourism. So if it's maybe a bit larger scale event, that's a great place to look. And that's just kind of what their website looks like. But I'll kind of walk you through the Grantsmanship Center and Instrumental. These are typically private foundation grant opportunities that you will find on the Grantsmanship Center and Instrumental. If you're looking at any state or local government agencies, I would simply just do a Google search of Wisconsin state agencies or Wisconsin state departments. And you can find, you know, of course, Department of Public Instruction, Department of Tourism, all of those state agencies. Many of them do offer different grant funding programs that you might want to take a deeper look at as they might relate to your events. With the Grantsmanship Center, again, these are primarily foundation grants. And this is what their website looks like. And I don't know how well you can see this, but you'll get the slides after, I believe, as well. So it looks like a lot of training and webinars and things, but if you hover over resources and select state grant resources, it'll come up with a United States map. And so on the map, you can click on whatever state you happen to be in, and it's most likely Wisconsin. So if you click on Wisconsin, and then you can scroll down to this top one here, Top Giving Foundations in Wisconsin. And I always look at that one, but then there's other ones here, community foundations, corporate giving programs, and those might be useful to look at as well. But when you click on that, it'll come up with a list of the top 40 giving foundations across the state of Wisconsin. So what you can do is you can click on each of those and navigate to each of their websites and sort of get a sense of what their, what that specific foundation's goals are, priorities are, values are, and see if they tie into whatever sort of event or organization you're looking to fund. The next one is Instrumental. And this is a little bit newer resource than the Grantsmanship Center. The Grantsmanship Center is actually what I started with. Instrumental is a bit newer, but it's much more robust and user-friendly in my opinion, and I've used lots of these. So they do have a paid version that you can access free for 14 days, and this isn't a paid endorsement, but I'd welcome you if you have a stretch of 2 weeks to take a little bit of a deeper dive on it, because it's a really great resource. But they do have a free version as well. If you click on Browse and Browse Grants, and this is the free version that we're looking at. I always start by state. You can search by state and you can search by focus area. So maybe environmental or human services or homelessness, housing, etc. Whatever the focus area would be. I always start with the state, because then once you select the state, you can further refine your search by focus area. And we're only seeing 8 at the top here, but if you click, there's like, I don't know, 50 different focus areas that you can search by. And then from there, kind of like the Grantsmanship Center, with the free version of Instrumental, I believe it'll show you 9 or 12 opportunities for free. But if you want to see more, you of course have to, well, do the free trial or pay for the service. But I would recommend utilizing the free version. It works just fine. And then some tips and best practices. So we'll kind of go through some of the top tips and best practices when you're writing a grant proposal. And it's really the objective of a grant proposal is selling your idea to a funder, whether it's an agency or a private foundation. But you want to take a look at their website and sort of understand their grant program and their process. So these are just some considerations when you're reviewing their website, reviewing their guidelines. Of course, understand their eligibility criteria. As a nonprofit, that's usually not an issue. If you're a 501c3, you're usually good. But just review it, make sure that any eligibility criteria that is there, you align with that. If you're spending hours on hours, developing a solid proposal, but then you submit it and you weren't even eligible, they're not going to look at it. Of course, any guidelines and submission requirements, any attachments that are needed with the application, maybe a 990, maybe some financial documents, maybe a board of directors list, any of those things, make sure anything that they're asking for you're giving to them and including in your application. Of course, the deadline. So the deadline for application, if there is one, some of them might be a rolling deadline. They accept applications at any time. Others, there will be maybe a quarterly deadline or annual deadline. So you might find the perfect, best fit grant opportunity, but if it's due tomorrow, you're probably not going to have the time to develop a competitive proposal. The amount of funding available, of course, you want to be sure that the amount of funding that is available and that to which you're applying would be enough to support whatever event you're looking to host. And if it's not, where are you making up the difference, whether it be from sponsorships or charitable donations or funding that the organization is putting towards the event. Their review timeline and selection criteria. So many times they will actually tell you on their website, or especially if it's an agency, a government agency, they'll always tell you how the review panel scores proposals. So review that, get an understanding of how the review panel is scoring your proposal, and be sure that that review criteria, as you're developing your proposal, you're directly speaking to the reviewer. And the review timeline. So again, this kind of goes along with deadline, but when is the deadline in relation to when awards are expected to be made in relation to when your event will be hosted. So just have an understanding of the timelines. Be sure when you're submitting your application, you're giving the review committee or review panel or board of trustees, whoever is reviewing proposals, you're giving them time to make a decision well enough in advance before you're hosting your event, so that you're not, in a state of not knowing, the week before an event. And any reporting requirements. So with foundation grants, many times post-award there will be requirements. Maybe provide different supporting documentation, maybe receipts, invoices, etc. However those funds were utilized. Just be sure that, they'll often let you know what the expectations are as far as reporting for that specific grant program. The next one is address funding priorities. So when you're looking at, let's say you're using the Grantsmanship Center to identify potential foundations who would fund your event. And you navigate to each of their websites. Many times on their website, they will tell you exactly what their goals, values, mission, objectives are. Each one is different. Maybe they are focused on youth development, or maybe services for veterans or homeless individuals. Whatever their priorities are, you want to, I always tell people, match the goals and priorities of the funder and write for the reviewers. So you want to be sure that you're tailoring your proposal to that funder's priorities. So, and that's one thing when you're reviewing those different foundations' websites, you want to think about how are we helping this foundation further their mission. So that's one thing to consider. So of course, research the foundation, identify their mission and values. Again, oftentimes they make this explicit on their website. Consider their goals and objectives. Review previously funded projects and organizations if you can. Sometimes on their website they will list their previous grantees. That helps you get a better sense of what types of organizations they fund, what types of projects they fund. Otherwise, if they don't do that, you can review their 990. So a 990 is a tax form and foundations need to file this, and they need to be made publicly available. Sometimes they'll have them on their website. Otherwise, if they don't, you can look them up. GuideStar is a great place to look, or ProPublica is a great place to look. They're both free. Or ProPublica is free. I'm not sure about GuideStar. But you can look up their 990 over previous fiscal years, and you can actually see on that form organizations they've funded previously. So you can sort of get an idea of, one, again, the types of organizations or projects that they typically fund. Two, the geographic scope that they fund. So where geographically do they give? And then you can also see how much they give. So they'll tell you how much they've given to these organizations. So that'll give you an idea of, okay, how much do they typically give when we are thinking about how much we want our ask to be. All right, the next one is provide a detailed budget. So with a grant proposal, especially if it's for a specific project or program or an event, you'll want to provide a detailed budget to help the funder understand how those funds will be utilized. If it's, let's say it's a general operating support grant, they typically won't ask for a grant-specific budget. They might just ask for an operating budget or an annual budget. That's a little more general. So you want to be sure, of course, the budget is feasible and includes all the necessary expenses to carry out the event. So consider all of those expenses that might be included. One is staff time. Now, staff time, like with everything else you include in your grant proposal, you want to make sure that everything that you're including is allowable. So sometimes especially with private foundations, you may not be able to include staff time. With government agencies, you can almost always include staff time. Any supplies and equipment, any costs or expenses it will take to fund and support your event. And then any matching funds or in-kind contributions. So this might be and this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but if you have, let's say, other sponsors who are sponsoring your event, include that in your budget as well and how much those sponsors are giving. And that, a lot of times, the foundation likes to see that it's not the sole source of income for that event. It likes to see that it's, part of a larger collaborative effort. All right, and then I just wanted to touch on this briefly, sort of an upcoming event, and I won't go in too much on this, but that was a lot of information, and there is a lot more information regarding grant writing as it relates to events and supporting a nonprofit. So we do have an upcoming workshop if you're interested that we are offering a special discount on for symposium attendees. It sort of walks you through each step of the process, from finding grant opportunities to submitting a successful grant proposal. And I do have some information on that, if you're interested. And happy to take any questions that you all may have. Yes?
I find that a lot of grants don't really want to support general operating funds. They want very specific things. And so for nonprofits that are kind of smaller, sometimes you have to create a special thing in order to apply for a grant, which isn't always the best use of resources. Anything to share about that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Many times, especially with private foundations, they don't like the general operating support. They want it to be a program specific or project specific, and it really, and you can sort of work through that. It's really about how you approach it, and maybe so much of it is persuasive writing.
Yeah.
And, maybe it's things that your organization is doing regularly that can be sort of worded or phrased as a project or a program. Of course, you wouldn't be able to include any sort of salaries in that, but, like a food pantry, for example. One of your general operating items as a food pantry is, of course, purchasing food, distributing food, and you might look at that as a general operating cost, but if you were to phrase it as some sort of food distribution project or food distribution initiative to apply for different grant funding, that's certainly, it's not being dishonest.
Right.
Your story is exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Of course.
Is there any sort of average amount of time that it takes to fully prepare a grant proposal, or is there any sort of average funding amount that is realistically often asked for?
Sure. Excellent question. So with one thing, it really varies by the type of funding source. So if it's a private foundation, a state or local government agency, or a federal agency, there's different benchmarks. So foundations, typically, you'd be looking at 30 to 50 hours. Now, it can be way less. Walmart Foundation, for example, gives different grants. and that takes maybe 5 minutes to fill out. You might have others though, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Ford Foundation, that are large national foundations that might be more, it might look more like a federal grant in terms of the time commitment. State and local government grants, typically 60 to 80 hours. Federal grants can really, typically that's 120, 200 plus hours. They want 20 to 30 pages of narrative and, all of these other attachments, and yeah, it's a little bit crazy. And then as far as funding, that again really ranges too. A lot of federal grant programs can be 50,000 all the way up into the millions with Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. Foundation grants really, I've seen $500 to millions. So one thing they'll usually say on their website what their typical range is, or even what their range would be as a first-time grantee. But another thing, if they don't say that, you can always reach out to the foundation, send them an email or submit a contact form, or look at their 990, and that'll tell you how much they've given in previous years to what organizations and all of that.
I'm going to give you the 2-minute warning. I know you can't get enough, but this is your 2-minute warning.
Thank you. Yes.
Somebody told me years ago, and I never done a grant like but as a board member, I need to know what the grant process is. And somebody told me, foundation grants yearly get your in the fall of the year. And they will give you the money at the calendar year. So mentally, I need to know that as a board member. Now, okay, is there a company that will help you fill out and do the work for the grant and take like a proportion of the grant money to pay your salary type? How would you? I don't know how would that work.
That's a good question. Yeah, we get that question a lot as far as like a commission or contingency-based payment plan. It's one thing, unfortunately, we're not able to do because of the Grant Professionals Association and a number of other associations in our industry don't allow for that. We'd make a lot more money if we did, but no, it's not. I know if you're working with maybe a fiscal sponsor, that's something where, well, but they don't write the grants, but if you are working with a fiscal sponsor, that's typically where any grant money you do receive, they would receive a portion of that. But as far as like grant writers, whether it's a firm or an independent consultant, they really can't ethically and with federal grants legally take any sort of commission.
Your firm though, that you work for, you're the one, you will help with writing the grants.
Absolutely.
You just can't pull money from what you're receiving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to figure out how to pay for that separately.
Yeah, whatever we win is all yours. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for. Thank you.